housing crisis was born who failed to act amidst a deepening crisis. Solving this crisis that got us into this crisis, we will overcome this crisis and once again secure that dream, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
Were these crises real, or were they taken advantage upon for the sole purpose of steering us away from the 200-plus years of our founding fathers and Adam Smith's old way of doing business?
And I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody.
Did the president's involvement with Acorn play into this massive spending? And what is the end game? Enough is enough. We will wait no longer for the crumbs at America's door. We are the majority, forged from all minorities. We will continue our fight until the American way is just one way, until we have shared the wealth, until we have won our freedom. Corporations shall have their role, producing jobs, providing products, paying taxes. No more, no less. They shall obey our wishes, respond to our needs, serve our communities. Is this the remaking of America that the president has been talking about? The remaking of the Founding Fathers' constitutional republic regressing to a democracy? Or the remaking of Adam Smith's proven free enterprise economy based on common sense natural law of supply and demand deteriorating to bailouts, rewarding failures, and redistributing wealth? Or worse yet, the remaking of individualism where hard work, ethics, and great leadership qualities are rewarded with great compensation, are forced to equal pay and status of those who possess the lesser skills of collectivism. Every sincere American who wants prosperity for themselves and their children's children must pay attention to the small details that come out of politicians' mouths. Even the word remaking should alert every single person who knows American history. When the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock in 1620, William Bradford governed the group in commune-style living. Everything each person grew, trapped, hunted, or made was pulled together in a community storehouse and rationed for all to use equally. Over half of the colony starved to death. It was not until Bradford issued the order that all had to fend for themselves that the colony began to prosper. America had over 100 years of success before the Founding Fathers and Adam Smith came along. So the question must be asked, does America need remaking? Restoring, yes, but remaking? Any remaking would be a violation of the American Constitution that was set up to protect the rights of all Americans. Most notably would be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Booms and busts have existed in our economy ever since the founding of America. While many economists were telling politicians to ease the burden on the taxpayers in order to slow the recession and boost the economy, the politicians instead pushed through massive spending bills, many of which they had been trying to push through for over 30 years now. Were these billions of dollars in bailouts and stimulus to spur on economic growth? Or was it to further expand governmental control and push through green agendas? In the last 9 months, government intrusion on the private sector has accelerated beyond constitutional limits. We now have politicians firing CEOs, closing dealerships, dictating what cars they can and cannot produce. Do we really want politicians in control of what brand, color, and size of a car you can drive? After committing trillions of dollars, what have they accomplished? A heavy tax burden on our children and grandchildren. Unemployment fastly approaching 10%. Waste on pork barrel spending such as studying why pigs stink. And most importantly, a direct assault on energy. Billions of our tax dollars have been initiated towards alternative energies and green infrastructures, which will disrupt every single person's whole way of life. From human reasoning and common sense, it's not that wind, solar, hydro, or battery are bad. They're just not as efficient, effective, or cheap. Especially when we are talking about mass-producing a product that most of society does not want, and an infrastructure that is not ready for it. From an economic viewpoint, we are not talking about the natural law of supply and demand that our founding fathers set up. Supply will flow only where a product is demanded. Instead, it has become backwards through governmental intrusion, where only a select few are demanding that the rest of us be supplied with something we do not want. That is called coercion and tyranny. This certainly does not resemble the Founding Fathers' system of free enterprise. Free to try, free to buy, free to sell, free to fail. Do you want to pay higher prices for gasoline or electricity? How about heating fuel? Do you want to be forced to drive ugly, unsafe, uncomfortable, noisy little tin cans? How about being forced into compilation to live a lower standard of living with inferior products and less than desirable health care like our poor veterans receive? People suffer and die when politicians start experimenting with our lives. History has shown this again and again. Governmental subsidies and regulations has always forced inferior products, high costs, and waste. During the Great Depression, FDR's regulations and subsidies purposely killed 6 million piglets in hopes of raising prices to help farmers. And yet, at the same time, millions of people were starving and would have loved to been able to eat those little porky amendments. Government wasted pork then, and they still do today, with the same asinine experiments. And it's not confined to just government. The same mentality exists in some privately owned companies, such as certain milk co-ops, who encourage farmers to dump perfectly good milk down the drain just to raise prices. And the complete opposite, where restaurants can't even give good food away to homeless and poverty-stricken people because of FDA regulations. These are proof enough that regulations and subsidies can be both good and bad. Again, we must be able to read between the lines and use common sense. We all want a cleaner and better world, not just for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren. We all seek alternatives to our energy sources, providing that those alternatives are truly better and truly desired in a free market enterprise of supply and demand. Until then, do you really want to risk the disruption of your daily lives by allowing governmental inefficiencies and waste to force more and more regulations on energy, healthcare, and food production? This current government intrusion intends to raise prices on our current energy sources until you and I cannot afford it any longer, and then we will be forced to buy subsidized, inferior alternatives. It has taken civilization over 5,000 years to reach the high quality of life you and I enjoy. And now, politicians want Americans to digress rather than progress. We started the 20th century with wind, solar, hydro, and battery power. And most of us have probably at one time or another experienced the inconvenience of a power outage, lost TV reception during our favorite television program, a down internet connection while doing very important work, or even going to the bathroom at a low-budget park with urinal pans and/or an outhouse-like shack with toilets sitting on a hole in the ground. How would you like to go back and live like that on a daily basis? Think back on how you felt during those moments of inconveniences. Do you want that with your daily electricity? After 100 years of progress, do not allow politicians to lower your standard of living by regressing back to old and tired arguments that hasn't worked. Do not let them steal your comfort, joy, and convenience. Don't be a silent majority any longer. Stand up, speak out, and let your voices be heard. Shout to the world that you want your American dream: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Tell politicians to restore America to her founding fathers' constitutional limits and to quit squandering the wealth of the nations. Join a Tea Party near you and help us to restore American innovation and exceptionalism. It's time to wake up, America.